Here's a request that I've seen 2 or 3 times pop up in our comments section. And I've sort of said, well, let's wait on that because you don't see this in paintings very often. And that is simply, show us how to do rain. So, even though you don't see rain in paintings very often, there's a difference between showing rain that looks fake and showing rain that probably looks a little more like rain. I want to show you that. Well, I'm going to show you 2 things. First, I want to show you how to figure it out. When you wonder how to do something in painting and you don't know what to do, best thing to do is to observe. Now, this is what will work with oil painting. It will work with acrylic if you go real fast before the acrylic dries. You would use another technique in watercolor and another technique in pastels. So let's say, want to make that clear to begin with. So rain, what do we know about rain? It can rain very slowly. It can rain very hard. Sometimes it can rain when the wind's blowing and the rain will be moving in a slanted direction. So there are all kinds of things that can happen with rain. What does rain do to the landscape? That's when you start observing. Here, I found a photo where it looks like a very cloudy or overcast day because either that or the color's been taken out of the photo. I don't know. All the other photos I found were fake. When I do these, if I don't have a photo already in my collection, I usually go to pixabay.com because those are uncopyrighted photos. But almost all the photos I saw on Pixabay when I searched for rain look fake. They were fake. The rain was superimposed, or the image or the attempt to show it raining was superimposed after the photo was taken. I only found this one, and I would have showed a better one if I could have found one that had better color. I think this one, though, because of the pattern of the rain, I think this one was actually shot with the rain falling. So we'll use that for observation, but it'd be better if you take your own photos when it's raining to study the pattern of rain and study what rain actually does to the landscape. All right, so what do we observe here? We observe that these little marks that the rain's creating, first of all, because they're falling like that, the camera is catching them as lines rather than individual marks. Well, our eyes see them that way too, pretty much. Our eyes average the raindrops as it's moving, as they do a lot of movement. So the best way to show rain in a painting is to kind of try to show that, not try to show little individual drops, because that's not actually how the eye see it. So there's the first thing. Now, what else? We can see it's not all really going in the same direction, but it's all falling in the general direction. We see a few little directions or angles that are tilting in a little bit off the angle that everything else seems to be falling. So that's something we notice. But something else that we notice is the color of the rain picks up the color of the background. It's sort of, as our eyes are looking through those raindrops, they're transparent. As our eyes are looking through, our eyes are mixing the color of what's behind them. And if it's really raining hard, all the values and the colors get closer. The values get closer together, and the colors get duller. But this is what we're going to deal with here. So I'm going to show you just one method that you can use to indicate rain, and hopefully to make it look more natural. So we observe. The things I've just talked about are the things that you observe. The other thing is you need to know what your brushes will do. Because if you choose a thick brush, it probably is not going to work as well. So if you have a kind of a flimsy brush like this, where you can where you really have to work to control the bristles of the brush, that's going to give you a more natural indication of the rain pattern. All right, that's the first thing. Now I want to show you first of all how you would create rain on a wet, if you're painting the wet, you're painting doing the painting, and while it's still wet. I also want to show you over here how you would do the rain if the painting is already dry. Like in this was on a rainy day. It was not actually raining when I did this little plein air study, but it was a rainy day, so everything was really close in value. So I'll show you that in just a moment. I'm going to very quickly here just throw kind of a little cartoon version of a tree trunk, just a tree trunk, and that is an arbitrary decision I made because it's really an easy image to use when I'm trying to show you just the principle. So let's just say I will kind of throw in here quickly images that would represent a couple of tree trunks, maybe have them joined like that at the bottom. And not going to make that, this is more a cartoonish version of what we would see there. And then we're going to throw in just kind of a little background here that I'm going to make very neutral. Let's make that a little lighter than that. Okay, we'll make that background a little bit lighter so that you can see values. And remember, I said I want this to be more of a cartoon version of what we might see. And so I'll just throw that in quickly. And I won't even try to put that background into the whole thing because I don't want to make this too long. But I do want to show you how it works, how the principle works. But we're going to pretend here that that's an image that I have finished. And I'm making that image itself a little bit on the blurred side because I know I want to show it in rain. And that's a good idea if you're doing an image in rain. You're probably going to see those images more blurred. So if you develop that blurred characteristic as you are by blending, as you are putting in the image itself, then that's going to add to that expression or interpretation of rain itself. Now I need to get that consistent as it goes on this side. There we go, something like that. And you see, something like that. See, that already gives you that feeling of blurredness and almost a feeling of rain itself. Now here comes the fun part. The rain is going, I said the rain kind of takes on the colors that we're seeing here, and the values that you see of the rain, the value of the rain itself is not white, so you wouldn't pick up white for that, but it's whatever colors you see through there, the values that you see through there, and the colors, plus a little lighter. So let's just do that. So I use these colors. This is the violet and blue-green and yellow, and just chosen those sort of arbitrarily to interpret that. No particular reason. You can choose whatever color you're working with. So I'm going to develop a neutral that's in that range. I need a little bit more violet in there and a little bit more of that white. Right there. Then we'll pull a little bit more of the white over. Now what I need there, let's see first of all if I have the color that, okay, see I've got that overall color of the little landscape-ish I created there. Let's make that just a little bit lighter. Now if you'll notice the value of what we would call rain pattern here is just a degree. You see on my palette, on my palette knife you can see it's just a degree lighter. It's not extremely lighter. It's just a degree lighter than the subject itself. So let's see. I just want to hold this up and compare the value. Get it just a tiny bit lighter perhaps. And it doesn't have to be thoroughly mixed. Tiny bit lighter. Okay. Now, here comes the fun part. So if you have any kind of a really flimsy brush, where you don't really have control of the bristles, what I want to do is just to barely touch that color with these bristles. I might have underdone it that time. Let's see. Barely touch it. And then now I want to determine the angle. I want my arm needs to flow in the same direction all the way through. Now that's not going to make, if I go this, that's not going to make the same pattern all the way down. So I need to start at the bottom. And here we go. So start at the bottom. Now I'm going to flip the brush around so that it doesn't pick up the same pattern all the time. And I'm going to actually kind of get these bristles all mushed up. There we go, like that. And let's see. And keep that pattern. You see, so I already beginning to sort of interpret that as rain. But the paint doesn't, this doesn't need to be wet. Do not wet the brush before you do this, by the way. And let's average some of those out and just sort of gently apply. There we go. Gently apply, allowing the brush to move in the same direction throughout. And allow some of the drops to be a little bit off angle, like we see up there. Some of these strokes can be a little thicker, as we see right there, and a little thicker and a little shorter stroke. And you can see now how we might be able to use that method for creating rain. But it requires getting to know what your brushes will do, because not all brushes are going to be able to do that. The fan brush is not a good idea because of the shape of the fan on the brush. So I would say a flat brush, not an oval brush, not a round brush, but I would say a flat brush that's relatively flimsy. And you might need to practice that several times before you would actually take it to a painting. Now, I'm going to take that away, and you would see then that you would do a similar thing if you're working wet on dry. The advantage of doing that wet on wet, when you're actually in the middle of a painting, is that it's wet. But if you have a painting that's already dry, or if you might prefer this method of creating that, then you would need to dampen that surface first. And that's the big key there. Everything else is the same, but you need to dampen the surface first. You may dampen that surface with either linseed oil by itself, very, very light coat, and I'll show you that in just a minute, or linseed oil that has been diluted a little bit with Gamsol or some really highly refined mineral spirits. So, and this, by the way, is pretty much the same thing as oiling out a painting. And by the way, if you are doing this on an old painting, if you decide you have an old painting and you'd like to make one that's been dry for a long time, and you'd like to put rain in that painting, you would need to clean, if you have that varnish, you need to clear that varnish off, clean it off with Gamsol or some mineral spirits, and then give it a coat of, then spray it a little bit with rubbing alcohol, wipe all that residue away, and then do this step. So, don't want to confuse people, but that's when we go back to work on old paintings that have been dried for a while, or ones we've put out in the stash and we decide to revive them or something like that. We need to give them a little bit of surface treatment first so that the oil's going to adhere. That's with oil painting. There are other, with watercolor you don't have to worry about that. And with acrylics, really you do need the wetter surface for this sort of thing with acrylics. Pastel, you don't have to worry about a thing. Even if you have sprayed it with pastel, you don't have to worry about a thing. But oil, it's a different character. All right, so you can see here now, this falls more in the yellow-green range, feeling of yellow-green, where the little little cartoonish painting I did for you is more in the violet range. And so I would want to create my little rain mixture over here with that yellowish green. So I'll just mix myself some yellow green right here. Kind of get that, try to get that that tone of yellow green I'm seeing there. Adding yellow to that mixture, and then more of my blue green to that mixture. Any kind of combination, I mean not any kind, but there are several combinations of hues that we can use to create the colors we're looking at. You don't have to use the same palette you used before, as long as you come up with the same hue or the same colors that you used before. See, that is a little bit too saturated and a little bit leaning a little bit more towards green rather than yellow green. So I want to adjust that. And you see, that's the key when you already have the painting done. This is closer to it. And so I'll just pull a little bit more of that bottom with that just a little bit less saturated. So I'll pull a little bit more of that violet into that, which will do the job. There we go. That's pretty close. Now let's pull the white out into that and pull it right here. And let's lighten that with white. It doesn't matter if the white cools it. It always will. Okay, what value we need that? I think that probably needs to be a little, now that I'm putting the white in it, I think that needs to be a little bit more neutral. So I'm going to pull a little bit more of the violet in it. And lighten it just a little bit more. Okay, we'll see. We'll see if that will do the job. I still feel that needs to be a little bit more neutral. So we're dealing with rain is neutral, or the color of rain, or color of water is, unless it's picking up, if water has a color in it, it's because it's picking up color from something else. So we want some of the color in this, but not necessarily very saturated at all. We just want to lean in the direction. So, well, I will try that and we'll see what happens. Now, rather than wash this brush does not need to be wet. If it's wet, it's going to have a different, it's going to respond differently. So, just wiping the brush out with my paper towel here should do the job there. Now, I'm going to, same thing, I want those bristles all disarranged. So I'll get them there, and then I want to pick up just enough of that, and let's see if we can create some falling rain here. Now I will just use that, say, there we go. Sort of like that, sort of like that. That kind of is a little bit too light, and so I'm going to darken it just a bit. It is too light as it goes over the dark part there. Just to sort of. Now this is water down here, so when it hits that water, we're going to begin to see more splashes like that. Now, because in this case, in this darker part, I'm going to take the paper towel and I'm going to give it just a little bit of a wipe down and blur it just a little bit. It's because you don't want your rain to look fake. There we go. You see, as I kind of blur it a little bit, it begins to feel a little bit more like rain. So you can see there, if I continue that process, let's get those, anything that makes it look fake, you can take a soft paper towel, like I'm doing right here, and blur it out. Now that you cannot do when you're working wet on wet, like I was doing earlier, because then it's going to blur out the images too. But when you're working wet on dry, where the painting's already dry, you can do that. And sometimes, as you can see, giving a couple of little swipes in the direction going opposite of the way the rain is falling can also help that look a little bit more natural. So, I think you can find that was something fun to play with. And so I think give that a try and see if you decide you want to put rain in some of your landscapes. Be sure and view all of our quick tips. And while you're doing so, subscribe to the channel, click on the bell so you'll always get a notice when we produce a new quick tip, which is every week. And if you have a question, leave it in the comments section and we'll make a quick tip for you. Also, take a trip over to DianneMize.com where I have full-length lessons, downloads, DVDs, lots of other stuff there, some free stuff for you. And while you're there, you can subscribe to the newsletter, and that way you'll always be informed every time we do something new.